Tonight, the Deputy Prime Minister says he is outraged and appalled after the mistaken release of a foreign prisoner from Wandsworth prison, but questions now about what he knew and when. Police are mounting an urgent manhunt for the sex offender Brahim Kadour Sharif as David Lammy is forced to defend why he didn't reveal the incident to MPs earlier. Later in the day, news of a second mistakenly released prisoner from the same prison broke. The Conservative leader, Badenoch, calls the government a shambles. I'll be speaking to the Shadow Home Secretary, Philp. We'll be live at Wandsworth Prison with all the latest on the most recent series of blunders in our criminal justice system. Also tonight, the biggest shake-up to the school's curriculum for a decade is on the way, with AI and fake news spotting set to make the grade. I'll be speaking to the Education Minister about what counts as a conspiracy theory. And after Zoran Madani, the Democratic Socialist candidate, wins a stunning victory in the race to become New York mayor, we'll look at what lessons the man who describes as Donald Trump's worst nightmare has for politics here. All that and more with our dream duo for this evening. That's Max Wilson and Baroness Nikki Morgan, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday. I'm Darren McCaffrey, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. A very good evening. 2 weeks ago, I branded the state of prisons in this country as a national embarrassment. What do you even say tonight? After not one but two more prisoners have been released in the past week by Wandsworth Prison, a prison that's been repeatedly in special measures. It is a national embarrassment still, a complete mess. Voters tonight must be tearing their hair out. But who is to blame? For the Tories, it is very much the Justice Secretary's fault, seemingly unable or unwilling to answer questions about all of this at Deputy PMQs a little earlier today.
Can he reassure the House that since Kobatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? I'm going to ask him the question again. Can he reassure the House that since Kobatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? It's a very specific question for him to answer. And I'm going to repeat it once more for the avoidance of doubt, because he didn't answer it twice. He's here to answer questions. Can he reassure the House that since Kobatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? So I'm going to ask him again. He's the Justice Secretary. Can he reassure the House that since Kobatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? Can he reassure the House that since Kobatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? Can he answer the question?
Now, just to be clear, this person was not an asylum seeker, so Mr. Lammy did not technically mislead the House, but this situation is getting worse under Labour, with the number of prisoners wrongly released doubling in the past year. And clearly those extra security checks brought in the immediate release of Kobatu have simply not worked. But let's also be honest here, this problem is not new. Years of cuts at the Ministry of Justice during the coalition years meant fewer prison places and fewer staff, even as our population increased. Many of the most experienced officers have fled as violence has increased inside a prison. And maybe we share some of the blame too. Voters are much less interested in criminal justice than we probably should be. Lock them up and throw away the key might be an easy reactionary position, but not necessarily one that works. So blame should be spread far and wide. But given that our prisons have become some of the most lawless places in this country, given it's entirely reflective about the ineffectiveness of the British state right now, it is also clear that the government needs to act, it needs to get a grip, and it needs to do it pretty fast. Well, let's get more on this major news story today. Let's go straight to Wandsworth Prison and join our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter. Tom, very good evening to you. Details still emerging tonight about what precisely has gone on in both of these cases.
Yes, within minutes of that exchange in the Commons, we revealed on Sky News at lunchtime that in fact, there had been another release of a sex offender. He was not and is not an asylum seeker, so the Conservatives, if they'd phrased the question better, may have got a clearer answer from David Lammy. But yes, another excruciating episode for the government, the Ministry of Justice and the Prison Service to have to try and confront not one, but two releases by mistake from this prison in southwest London in the space of the last week. The first one relates to a 24-year-old Algerian sex offender who was actually serving time for a different offence. This is Brahim Kadour Sharif. He was arrested in September. He was in prison, released in error on October the 29th. And then, inexplicably, it took the prison authorities 6 days to inform the Metropolitan Police. It was only yesterday that the Met were told about this, and they started a manhunt to try and find this man. And in that 6 days, of course, he could have got anywhere. So that is embarrassing episode number one at Wandsworth Prison. And then during the course of our reporting on this afternoon, another one has emerged that left here on Monday in error. This was a mix-up between the courts and the prison. A prisoner called Billy Smith from Woking in Surrey had been convicted of fraud offences, sentenced to 45 months in prison, but the message between the court and the jail here was mixed up, and they got the message that it should be a suspended sentence when it was actually a jail sentence. So he was released, and now Surrey police have started a manhunt for Billy Smith with links to Woking. Again, he has been missing for 2 days now. This all in the wake of the Hadush Kabatu fiasco at Chelmsford Prison, and at the point at which the Justice Secretary ordered this independent investigation, vowed to the public that this would not happen again, said that the checks on the gates of prisons up and down the country would be tighter than they've ever been, and here we are with two manhunts that were entirely avoidable.
OK, Tom, live for us there at Wandsworth Prison. Thank you very much indeed. And just bring you up to date with a little bit more breaking news coming in to us here at Sky around the prison system, and that police are investigating the death of a prisoner, Carl Bevan, in HMP Wakefield. Now, Mr Bevan was serving a life sentence for murdering a 2-year-old Lola James. A prison service spokesman has said this evening that HMP Wakefield's prisoner, Carl Bevan's death, was confirmed on the 5th of November, unable to comment further while the police investigate. So a death there, clearly, at another prison in the UK tonight. We'll bring you more details on that story as we get it here on Sky News. But let's return to those prison escapees and join our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's with me in the studio. And obviously, there's a big political element to this, Rob, unsurprising as well, not least of all about what happened at Deputy Prime Minister's Question Time today with David Lammy, about what he knew, when he knew it, and why he didn't answer any of these questions.
Yeah, he did know. He was told last night. We know the Metropolitan Police only found out yesterday lunchtime. We were told that he and his officials were working, or his officials at least were working overnight to try and get this guy back. We're also told that he thought it wouldn't have been responsible, essentially, when there were so many moving parts in this investigation, when the details were still emerging, for him to comment on it. So it sounds like he was waiting for the Metropolitan Police to make this announcement, and he didn't think that he should make it first. Look, as one former Justice Secretary pointed out earlier, that wouldn't have stopped him from saying, there's a developing situation, I'm aware of this, I can't really comment further. Plenty of people have queried already, though, whether actually that excuse, that reason, if you like, is valid, and about whether actually he could have coughed up, quite frankly. And
there's unsurprisingly a lot of calls tonight for David Lammy to come back to Parliament and answer these questions, though he has issued a statement.
Yeah, I think he didn't help himself by basically going on the attack. I think watching back that PMQ's exchange with the knowledge that he knew about this prisoner that was let out wrongly makes it even more perplexing why David Lammy went quite so hell for leather at the Tory bench about their record in office, given he knew that some pretty deeply embarrassing news was about to break, if not during PMQs, then quite soon after Prime Minister's questions. As you say, opposition parties said, OK, we know this now, come back, take some questions. He didn't. Of course, that matters because Parliament is, in about 20 minutes or so, about to rise for a very short recess, and he won't be back until Tuesday. So that'll be the next moment that MPs have to scrutinise the Justice Secretary in the Commons.
Robbie, you and I have talked about this before. We've talked this many times about, the phrase in politics is the buck stops with the minister or the prime minister or whatever. In this case, I mean, David Lammy hasn't also been Justice Secretary very long. How much is it ever a minister's responsibility when it's possibly human error much further removed from any kind of ministerial office?
Yeah, a lot of political finger-pointing between the parties going around. It should be said that actually accidental releases aren't all that uncommon. In 2024-25, there was 262. Now, a lot of that was down to mistakes being made as part of the on-purpose early release system that Labour brought in to deal with prison pressure, which of course was massively tied up with how the prison system was managed under the Tories. Even before then, it bounced around at about 50 to 100 per year. So when you consider that, it's not actually that surprising that you've got at least 3 people in the space of, 10 days being accidentally
It's pretty standard,
released.
some might say, yeah.
And in terms of, well, who's to blame for that, we've had a lot of ex-prison officers, people that work in that system on today, and said, look, the answer is about staffing. It's about resource, a lack of staff. It's about turnover in the prisons and a lack of experience in the prison. And if we look at the prison associated with these two individuals who were wrongly released from Wandsworth, there was a report into Wandsworth a month or so ago that found for 1,500 people in there was often not more than 80 or so officers looking after them. And when that inspection report went into the prison, the officers there couldn't even give accurate numbers of how many people were actually in the prison.
Wow.
So look, that is why the government at the moment points the finger at the previous administration and says, this is because of how you managed it, and we're cleaning up the mess. Ultimately, though, look, it builds into that message of nothing really working. And when nothing is working, who do voters look at? Well, they look at the government. And who's the government now? Well, it's David Lammy and Labour.
Indeed, Rob, appreciate that. That is quite something when you hear that even prison guards aren't entirely sure how many people are in the actual prison. Appreciate your time. Rob Powell there. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to the Education Minister, Georgia Gould, and we'll hear from her a little later in terms of the school curriculum story that she came in to talk about. But I did also want to get a reaction to the news of that prisoner release. Yet again, it seems that a prisoner has been accidentally released from Wandsworth Prison. How has this happened again?
It is outrageous that this has happened. I know people viewing this today will have that question and will be, deeply angry. And I think all of us in government are angry that this has happened for a second time. David Lammy has already called for an investigation into the previous incident. We've appointed Dame Lynn Owens to oversee that. We are acting quickly to put more checks in place, but it is not good enough, and we need to sort it out.
Who's responsible for this, though?
Well, I think that this has happened in a prison. We don't know exactly what's gone wrong
The reason
here.
I ask that because, do you know if David Lammy knew a Prime Minister's questions or Deputy Prime Minister's questions?
I think
because he was asked repeatedly this question and essentially didn't answer it.
It's really important that we always follow due process, and it is for the Metropolitan Police to lead on an announcement, and the Metropolitan Police had not publicly set that out, so David Lammy was not in a position to do that until the Metropolitan Police had.
Do you know if he knew?
I don't know what David Lammy knew or didn't know, but what I am absolutely sure of is that the Met Police had not put this into the public domain, and so David Lammy would not have been able to talk about it in Prime Minister's questions ahead of the Met Police setting that out.
You talk about how urgent all of this is. It is urgent because 262 people have been 262 people, I'll say that again, have been accidentally released in the last year, including some in recent weeks. Apparently there's extra checks that were put in place before those most recent prisoner escapes. They're not working, are they? Well, they're clearly not working.
We're doing an investigation into it. We need to understand it. But I think it is really important to put some context into the system that we inherited. And I'll just give you some statistics that I think bring this to life. Under the last Labour government, 28,000 new prison places were built. Under the last Conservative government, it was 500. In the short time we've been in government, we've increased it by 2,600. So we are getting to grips with a broken system. this should not have happened and there are no excuses for it, but, this is a system that isn't working and we will act swiftly to prevent this happening further.
Well, just finally on that, you may well be right in all of this, but this has now happened on your watch. It's now repeatedly happening on your watch. The numbers are going up under your watch. What guarantees or indeed what can you say to the British public tonight, saying, almost pulling their hair out at the fact that this is happening and it's getting worse? What needs to change, not in a review that's going to report back in months' time, what needs to change right now to stop this happening tomorrow, the next day or the day after?
Nobody is angry about this than David Lammy and ministers. We are absolutely committed to getting on top of it. That's why we're putting more checks in place, and if we need to go further now, we will do, and we are absolutely determined that this stops happening. It is a huge priority for this government. It's unacceptable, and we will act. And
David Lammy should now go back to the Commons. He's the Justice Secretary. He didn't answer the questions of PMQs. He now does know, we all know. Shouldn't he go back and answer these questions? I'm sure that Parliament will discuss this. I'm sure that this will continue to be a matter of debate over the coming weeks, as it should be, and we are ready to be held to account on our action. OK. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, that was the Education Minister there, and I'll be speaking to Georgia a little later in the programme about her announcement, the government's announcements around the school curriculum changes. But let's return, as we were just talking there about prisons, to our duo for this evening. We've got the former Labour Party advisor, Max Wilson, and the former Conservative Minister, Baroness Nicky Morgan. A very good evening to you both. Nicky, let's start with you if you can. This is a shambles. I don't think anyone's, even government ministers, aren't pretending it is not. What's your sense of who is to blame here? Because there is a bit of a blame game and everyone seems to be pointing fingers at everyone else.
and the people watching, the public, will be very frustrated by that.
Well, I said tonight, tearing their hair out.
Well, ultimately, they'll say, actually, in a way, it sort of doesn't matter who is responsible, but actually it's happened on this government's watch, and therefore, please could they sort it out? And I thought the fact that the Minister for School Standards didn't offer any kind of it. She said, this is outrageous. We know people will be frustrated watching it. Look, I think we know that justice policy and the running of prisons is something that has been difficult. It's difficult for the last administration, difficult for this one. But the fact is, the current government have now been in power for well over a year. And so I think that doesn't mean there aren't going to be problems, but it's a question of leadership, and it's a question of having a plan to say, we know these things can happen, but this is how we're going to stop it. This is how we're going to make sure that prison governors know who's there. And the other thing is, as we were just saying, this is not the first of these events in the last 2 weeks. And so actually you'd have thought that when something like this has happened, very high profile in the last fortnight, actually, ministers and officials would have said, right, we've got to do everything we can to make sure this does not happen again, at least for the foreseeable future.
Max?
So I think it's clearly terrible and it's unacceptable and things need to change. But I think you talk about the blame game. First of all, I think it's more important about what action is taken now to stop this happening again. So if this has happened...
Yeah, but the problem is that was said a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely. But so there's a systemic problem at the moment. Who's to blame for that? I don't know. You were talking about earlier about whether it's actually with the prisons themselves, prison boards, who knows. There is a systemic problem here. There is also a structural problem here as well. Because the justice system, the prison system, is literally crumbling at the moment.
Particularly somewhere like Wandsworth Prison, that's a Victorian prison.
Absolutely. There was a report where there's leaking ceilings, where the staff are under threat, being attacked. The justice system, the prison system, has been underfunded for decades. The Tories, the previous government, completely failed to invest in it. They failed to build new prisons. And I think it's that structural side that we're starting to see now. Now, Labour are trying to get a grip on it, structurally, systemically, but also immediately. But it's going to take time because some of these problems they inherited are going to take time to sort out.
And, Nicky, isn't that the crux of why the Conservatives do need to take some blame for this, to be honest, which is, Georgia said it there, I have to say it, and I've checked it out and it's true. In the last 14 years before when the Conservatives were in government, 500 prison places were built in this country. Our population increased by 6 million. 500 places. That's led to, obviously, the pressure on the prisons. It's led to these early releases, legitimate ones most of the time, but early releases of prisoners, and a lack of funding has led to lots of experienced staff leaving, which then means you probably end up with inexperienced staff who make mistakes.
Well, I think that's right. Certainly about staff. It's an extremely challenging job to be a prison officer. I'll take your thing. I haven't checked out the 500 places, but I do seem to remember when I was in government there was huge debate about new prisons being built. One of the challenges, of course, is the planning system, which again has also been decades long in being criticised, but getting a new prison built. And actually, of course, you know, communities are not so keen on having new prisons near them. But there is also an issue about, you know, are we locking up the right people? You know, are the sentences the right length? Is any rehabilitation going on inside our prisons at all? And of course, there's a constant pressure on Parliament to keep passing. We know we are about in the House of Lords debating the crime and policing bill, where there'll be more offences created for very good reason. But you create more offences, you create more people that end up in prison.
What do you think, Max, though, about what David Lammy did today? I mean, it does seem a little odd that he wasn't prepared to allude to the fact, I mean, he knew the news was going to come out, that he was aware of this as Prime Minister's questions, or Deputy Prime Minister's questions.
So the thing about PMQs is it's an extremely stressful environment and situation, and David Lammy is not used to doing it. He's stepping in. So I think there is an element here where, actually, do you know what? It's quite hard for him to make those decisions really on the fly.
He's the Justice Secretary. If he was made aware of this yesterday, and given what's happened with Kabatu, I mean, I don't think it's rocket science to work out that he may well be asked about prisons.
Well, I think normally in PMQs, generally they tend to go away from the subject where the minister covering it. But I think that what happened there is that if he were to allude to it, that would have then led to more questions, which maybe he wasn't in a position to be able to answer to. And yes, he can say this is an ongoing situation, more information is coming through. But then I can't help but wonder that would look as though he hasn't got a grip on the situation. So I think he was faced with only poor options, shall we say, and he went with the least bad option, which was to attack the Tories, to attack James Cartledge, who, of course, was a Justice Minister in the previous government, so maybe he's also got some questions to answer.
OK, fascinating, and is a massive political issue as one is clearly a practical one, but I think as you both alluded to, there might be some very fundamental, really difficult problems in this country, and the prison system is clearly one of them. And it is a story we're going to be returning to a little later, but we've also been keeping across a speech that Donald Trump has been making at the American Business Forum. Of course, it comes after those difficult set of results for the Republicans yesterday, not least of all in New York itself. Let's have a listen in to what President Trump had to say.
The Democrats are so extreme that Miami will soon be the refuge for those fleeing communism in New York City. After last night's results, the decision facing all Americans could not be more clear. We have a choice between communism and common sense.
And of course, that story and definitely the prison story will feature in tomorrow's papers. I'm going to go as far as to say I think it'll be front page news on many of them. We have got our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be The Sun's political editor Jack Elsom and the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman. That's from 10:30 tonight here on Sky News. OK, you're watching the Politics Hub. Up next, more on that prisoner mistaken release. I'll get the view from the Conservative Party, speaking to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, after the break. Stay tuned.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Now, more on that mistaken release of 2 prisoners from HMP Wandsworth prison as that manhunt continues tonight. Well, a little earlier, I got the thoughts of the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. This is an absolute mess. No one's going to disagree with that. Who's to blame, do you reckon?
Well, first of all, I think David Lammy should have given an honest and straightforward answer in the House of Commons today. He was asked 5 times by my colleague James Cartledge about the accidental release of prisoners. 5 times he was asked, and instead of giving a straightforward answer, he blustered, he shouted, he frankly didn't properly answer the question at all. It now turns out that not only were 2 prisoners in the last few days accidentally released early from Wandsworth prison, it turns out that he actually had a folder in his possession at PMQs as he was standing there with the details of those early prisoner releases, certainly one of them, which he found out about last night. And even though he was standing there with the details in a folder, he did not say anything. And he subsequently tried to justify that by saying, oh, the police didn't want it released. Well, the police have since come out and confirmed they had no objection to information being disclosed. This is basically about transparency and openness.
Well, it is, but it's also a little bit about process. I mean, we're talking about the accidental release of 2 prisoners here, and I'm asking you who is to blame rather than who said what and when. This is much more about who do you think is to blame?
Well, I think it is about honesty, actually, because he was asked questions in front of the whole country at Prime Minister's questions, and he didn't give an honest answer. So it is actually also about honesty, about integrity, about being upfront with the public, instead of trying to hide it, as David Lammy clearly did. I'd just been in Parliament just now, calling for him to come back to the chamber, back to Parliament, to give a full explanation of himself and explain why it was he didn't give a straightforward answer.
The reason I'm asking the question about who is to blame, because there's a lot of people, frankly, to blame for this. Now, one of them might be Wandsworth Prisons itself. It's been in special measures since April 2024. And previous to that, it's not had a great record. That was when you guys were in government. The point here is, the wider point is the prison service has been in a state for quite a long period of time. I mean, hundreds of prisoners were accidentally released when you guys were in government.
Well, look, the Labour...
I don't remember you rushing to Parliament to make statements.
Well, when Conservative ministers were asked a straightforward question, they usually gave a pretty straightforward answer, which David Lammy didn't do. Look, the Labour government has now been in office for getting on for a year and a half. So I think it's pretty pathetic for them to try and blame anybody apart from themselves. In relation to foreign offenders, so the first offender released accidentally from Wandsworth last week, an Algerian national, and there was also obviously the notorious case of the Ethiopian man who sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl in Epping, removed recently. In those cases where you have a foreign national, my view is that when a foreign national completes their sentence, they should all be immediately removed from the country,
But
deported.
that didn't happen when you guys were in government. Let's look at this. So Wandsworth Prison was in special measures when you were in government. Second of all, we know this. You talk to ex-prison officers, talk to ex-governors. They say the big problem of the last couple of decades is lots of experienced prison staff have left. And they left because you cut the budget. They just did. The reason is that we have got lots of inexperienced prison officers now because lots of them left while you were in government.
Well, and a lot were recruited as well. More prisons got built as well.
Not experienced
But look,
ones.
I come back to the point I made. We're a year and a half now into this Labour government. This is on their watch. They didn't start in government last week or last month. They've been in power for a year and a half now. They've had plenty of time to make the changes they may want to make. Now, we've got new leadership. We've got a new leader. We've got a new Shadow Home Secretary, which is me. Neither of us, neither Kemi was Prime Minister, nor was I Home Secretary before. We have a new approach, which in relation to foreign criminals is that we should come out of the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, and that will mean we can immediately deport not just some, but all foreign offenders as soon as they are eligible for release. And that means this question of accidentally releasing people into the community would not arise.
OK, so coming back to essentially why we're in this situation, so I'll go through it again. Wandsworth Prison was in special measures when you were in government. The number of prison officers were cut when you were in government and lots of experienced officers left. And now I get down to the crux of the matter, which is how many prison places, net prison places, were made when you guys were in government for 14 years. Do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't.
You don't know that?
But I do know.
Well, I'll tell you that.
I wasn't even an MP for most of that
Okay,
period.
well, I'll tell you, it was 500. The population in this country increased by millions of people over that period, and you increased prison places by 500.
And do you know how much... hang on, let me ask you. Do you know how much crime went down by over that 14-year period?
So
and the answer is about 50%.
Yes, and what did you have to do at the end of your government? You had to release prisoners early because there were not enough spaces. To be fair to the Labour Party tonight, they may well have responsibility for this. David Lammy may have questions to answer.
Certainly does.
But the prison service was an absolute mess when you left it in July 2024. That is a fact. It was a mess. Everyone who worked in the prison service said it was a mess.
Well, OK, I mean, you may assert that, but we did have more people in prison than ever before. We had record numbers of police officers, 149,769 to be precise, and overall crime had fallen by about 50%, according to the Crime Survey of England and Wales. But look, to be honest with you, that is in the past. Labour have been in power for a year and a half, and you repeated your question, so I'll repeat my point. Labour have been in power for a year and a half. They must take responsibility for the failures that they are presiding over. And for David Lammy to be asked a straightforward question 5 times and not to answer it, even though he had the information in a folder in his file, I think is disgraceful. It's hiding things from the public. He has been found out in a pretty bad way. He needs to apologise and get himself back to Parliament this evening to explain himself.
OK. Chris Philp, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's pretty unlikely, isn't it? Given the fact, as Rob suggested earlier, Parliament is about to go into recess until next week. OK, you're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Up next, the biggest school shake-up in England in a decade that could see children learning about everything from AI to spotting fake news. I'll be speaking to the Education Minister after the break. Welcome back. Now, the biggest shake-up of schools in England in a decade has been announced. It's set to see GCSE exam time cut by up to 3 hours and children taught about subjects ranging from AI to mortgages, plus the skills to spot so-called fake news. Well, I've been speaking to the school's Standard Minister, Georgia Golds, and this is my interview. I suppose my first question is, we live in a country in which, let's be honest about this, a lot of things have gone wrong recently. One of the things we've got right in recent years is our education system. When it comes to educational attainment, we're going up the league tables. Why you've decided to change something that clearly is working?
So the last curriculum and assessment review was 10 years ago, and the world has changed massively in the last 10 years. And I think it's really important that we update the curriculum to prepare young people for the modern world. And we will build on some of the things that have worked, but also take on some of the areas that haven't. And, 2/3 of young people from disadvantaged backgrounds at GCSE don't get a good pass in English and maths. That is just not good enough. So we need to be working much earlier to support those strong foundations in English and maths. And we need to respond to the world as we see it. Some of the key skills that teachers, young people, employers have told us that our young people need: media literacy, digital literacy, financial education. They're all really important to help young people deal with the world as it is.
Yeah, and one of those I read is AI, technology. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want to cause any offence to teachers here, but, do teachers know anything about AI? As I say this, lots of the people working in AI don't. How are you going to teach AI? It's changing quite a lot.
We absolutely have to, because our young people are using AI, and they will be, as they will go into a world where AI is commonplace. So it's critical that we give young people the skills to be able to kind of understand how AI works and to be able to be part of that themselves. We are doing really well in terms of teacher recruitment, and particularly STEM subjects. So we want people who are experts in those fields to be coming into teaching. And as we develop this new curriculum, we'll be, looking at how we bring more into it.
I'm just a little bit suspicious about how much the average teacher will know about artificial intelligence, but we shall see.
Well, you underestimate the average teacher.
Maybe I do. Let's talk about the other kind of eye-catching thing, I should say, which is around this idea of conspiracy theories and trying to make people more alert about a conspiracy. What is a conspiracy theory, though?
So young people have said that, I think half of them have said that they know someone who believes a conspiracy theory, and that can be a belief that isn't backed up by evidence or facts or kind of mainstream kind of news or investigation. And we want young people to be able to...
Who gets to decide what it is, though?
Well, I was going to say, we want young people to have the skills to kind of challenge what they read. We're not going to tell young people what to believe, but we want them to have critical thinking. We want them to be able to look for sources. We want them to be able to spot emotive language and to be able to just think critically about the wide range of different information that we consume.
Well, let me put one to you. Do you think that COVID started in a lab in Wuhan?
No, no, I don't think that. I think that, I think on all of these, we have to be guided by the evidence and the science.
So the interesting thing is that was suggested to be a conspiracy theory, but now the overwhelming evidence from the CIA and others is that it probably did. And you just said that you didn't believe it did happen.
Was it I don't know how it started.
This gets to the heart of the serious heart of what is a conspiracy theory and who gets to decide what it is.
And these are exactly the conversations we need to be having in classrooms. This kind of dialogue, this kind of discussion. So about big events and where there is often alternative narratives that are placed online, and looking at the evidence, looking at what backs it up, what has the CIA said on something. These are the kind of things that we want children to be discussing.
Just briefly on foreign languages, because that's another significant change, it seems, or at least the critics seem to think so. Why have you done? We're pretty bad at foreign languages. Many feel that this will make us even worse.
So, the regime we previously had didn't actually see a massive increase in foreign languages.
So
it was a 1% increase since 2010, but we absolutely have not given up. We think this is a really important subject for young people to learn, to be able to kind of access other cultures. It's an important part of our education system. And we're actually adding a new qualification, a new stepped qualification to help young people to really be able to move forward with modern foreign languages. But we're just offering real choice for young people, modern foreign languages, humanities, the arts, what makes a broad education and allowing young people to follow their passions.
Well, let's bring back in our panel tonight Nikki and Max, who are with me. And Nikki, what did you make of that? Because to be fair, I was focusing on a few issues there. I mean, this is a big shake-up with like real consequences across a whole broad range of things.
It is. I mean, firstly, I wish we talked about education policy more broadly often in Westminster, because actually it really matters. It matters to the shape of the country, things like the economy, the path that people choose in life, and everything else. So this all feels very familiar, because 10 years ago I was in the Secretary of State's seat and we were making changes. I would say to ministers that today is probably the high point, if they like, of their announcements, because I think many of us who've been there have got the scars from actually in the detailed reform of the curriculum into exam qualifications. So the questions you were asking about things like conspiracy theories, I mean, obviously it wouldn't be taught in that way, but it is a question to ask, which is, well, exactly how do you equip to make sure there are good conversations in classrooms, to encourage critical thinking, awareness that what you encounter on the internet may not always be accurate. You should always ask questions about it. And those are lessons that aren't just relevant to young people, they're relevant for all of us.
I should say. Yeah.
But I think broadly, I welcome a lot of this. The curriculum does need modernising. I think AI is absolutely a part of our lives. I welcome the fact we're going to have, more testing awareness of how students are doing in those first couple of years at secondary school. I'm a little worried about the grammar changes for the primary curriculum, because, we have done very well English schools in international league tables and things like reading, and that's because of the grammar changes we've made. But look, overall, I think it's a good step. Becky Francis, who led the review, is well respected. I think, as ever, how this translates into actual change will be key to watch.
Max?
I think that it's a broad range here, and as Nikki says, this is a process, this is a review. Obviously, it's government-backed, and the government are going to be supporting most of it, but there's going to be consultations with stakeholders, with politicians, so there's going to be a lot of different bits and pieces that are going to change around it before it actually is enacted in a few years' time. I think that I'm not usually in the habit of talking up Tory achievements, but when it comes to...
Here we go.
But I will say, when it comes to reading standards amongst children, that was something that the last Tory government did well. And part of that was because of phonics and the focus there. And I was glad to see in the detail of this that Labour are going to be doing even more training with reception year teachers to try and get the phonics up even higher. With Labour, the government have got this target of 90% of primary school children.
What is it?
It's how children learn to read. So it's spelling out, it's the sounds. It's a very different way from how it used to be taught.
Okay.
So I'm glad that there is a focus on that. I'm also glad that there is a broad focus where it's not just arts or science. There is a focus on getting more children into STEM subjects, but also encouraging music classes as well. Sometimes this debate ends up being binary, whereas actually children need a broad education. And then to your questioning earlier about AI, I mean, I've got no idea how this is going to happen in practice, but it seems to me that a crucial part of thinking about AI is about developing critical thinking amongst children, so they can actually think about what this is at the moment, where it will go next, what are the morals around it. And I think a focus on that critical thinking element has to be a key part of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, though, because I always find that the generation who grew up with the technology are normally the best generation at using it. It's all those people like us, the older farts, who are slightly worse at it. But just on that point, actually, about change, because, 10 years ago, AI was a thing, but it was a very niche thing. Now it's a very central thing to increasingly all our lives. I mean, where it's going to be in 10 years, none of us know. And isn't that the point? By the time this gets announced, it goes through all the things that you talked about, lots of, particularly the kind of cutting edge bit of the curriculum, could well be slightly out of date.
Well, I think they're talking about implementing in 2028.
Okay.
So we've got, another 3 academic years. And you're right. I suppose that the lesson from this is, how do you continue to keep certain parts of the curriculum up to date? So particularly computing. So you're right, 10 years ago we talked about coding, which people don't seem to talk about anymore. It's always about AI, and then quantum will be the next thing probably. But there are going to be other parts of the curriculum. I'm going to say history, and probably I'm going to get shouted at now by all the history teachers who might be watching. But there'll be certain bits that obviously are slower time in terms of needing to be updated. But I think that's what DfE will be interesting to see how they plan to continue to keep certain bits of the curriculum, as I say, up to date.
Okay, really fascinating, and an issue that we will be returning to, not least of all AI, which is, we seem to talk about it all the time. Okay, we're going to go to the United States now because President Trump, as we talked about a little earlier, has been talking in the last hour or so in a speech referring back to that big win in New York for Zohran Madani, who, of course, is now the new mayor of that city. Let's have a listen into what the US president had to say a little earlier.
The Democrats are so extreme that Miami will soon be the refuge for those fleeing communism in New York City. After last night's results, the decision facing all Americans could not be more clear. We have a choice between communism and common sense.
Let's bring in Mark Stone, our US correspondent, who is clearly at that speech. And Mark, a reflection not just on New York there, but let's be honest about this, not the best of nights for President Trump, a better night for the Democrats.
Yeah, for sure. I hope you can hear me, Darren, over the music, the village people, YMCA, just carrying Donald Trump off the stage after a long, long speech here at the America Business Forum in the heart of Miami. An interesting choice by the president to be here. It is, of course, exactly a year since he was propelled back to the White House for that second term as the American president, and he's chosen to be here, perhaps a safe space among business leaders at a business forum in a safe state as well, in Florida, his home state. And he spent the past hour reminding those business leaders, who I have to say are absolutely fans of his down here in Florida, wealthy business people, reminding them of just how great he thinks America is 10 months into his second term. There was some words, though, you played a few of them there, about Zohran Mamdani, who has been elected as the Democratic Party mayor of New York City, one of 3 upsets for the Republican Party, the other 2 being the governor races, both in Virginia and in New Jersey, both of them to Democrats as well. And, you know, he frames Zohran Mamdani, as you might expect him to, as a communist. He's said it before. Mamdani is a proud socialist, a democratic socialist. He doesn't hide from that. His speech last night was very much about all of that. But from Trump's perspective, he's a communist. And I think, in a way, his election will kind of allow Donald Trump to do what he's done before, to remind those who are listening that the Democrats are now moving far to the left of center. In a sense, I think that will somewhat help him. But what's also true, and we've been traveling around the country over the past week or so, we've got a real sense that, while those that are already wealthy, the business leaders, are happy with the economy under Trump, the stock market doing well, drill down, talk to the people who propelled Trump to the White House, the grassroots, Republicans in places like Pennsylvania. They are still struggling. The cost of living is still high. The figures may be good, but people aren't feeling it. It was a problem for Joe Biden. It remains a problem for President Trump.
Okay, Mark Stone, live for us there in Miami with YMCA in the background. Thank you very much indeed. And I think sometimes we have to kind of remind ourselves that after US presidential elections, we now essentially always get the village people and YMCA. It is rather odd, isn't it? But there we go. Okay, right, you're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Up next, we'll have more on Mamdani's win in New York. He's been self-styled as President Trump's worst nightmare as he stormed to victory in New York. But we'll be asking whether any lessons can be learned here at home. That's next.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, we'll have the latest on the manhunts for not 1, but 2 prisoners released by mistake from Wandsworth Prison. Plus, tonight I'm joined in the studio by Australian campaigners who say that their idea to tackle knife crime could also work here. And as Prince William follows in his mother's footsteps in Brazil, his brother writes a love letter to Britain. All that and much more on the UK Tonight from 8.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay.
Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I am inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
Welcome back to Sky News. Now, before the break, we were talking about Zohran Madani's victory in New York. Donald Trump, of course, has made no secret of not being his biggest fan. But back here, the city's mayor-elect has attracted his own supporters, not least of all the Green Party leader, Zach Polanski, who told Sky News that the election felt like a moment where hope has triumphed.
I think what Zohran really did was connect with the lives of ordinary people, mobilise young people, and it wasn't just about social media. I think that sometimes it becomes about the communication style. He's undoubtedly an incredible communicator, but actually I think it was about the policies. It was a relentless focus on inequality, and that's exactly what we're going to do here.
And it also seems that even those on the right side of left-wing politics, i.e. the Health Secretary Wes Streeting, was also keen to congratulate him. This is what he posted on social media today, saying that Madani's campaign had been inspirational and that there were lessons for progressives to be learned the world over. Well, let's bring in Nikki and Max, who are still with us. And I suppose you look at this, are there lessons to be learned? Because I was also wondering, I was saying to you guys during the break, what is an American communist? I mean, Wes Streeting to Donald Trump is probably an American communist.
Well, I think the whole notion of lessons being learned is quite overblown, because we're talking about mayor of a city. We're talking about this election was, frankly, a foregone conclusion because it's a democratic city. What that necessarily, how that then correlates to a parliamentary system in the UK at a general election for a country rather than a city, I'm not sure. So I think the notion of these lessons...
He did a bit like Jeremy Corbyn, though, in 2017, managed to seemingly get some people who might not have voted ever before to come out, which was interesting.
Sure, mobilising, but I think the lesson to be learned, as it were, is that you pick a good candidate who talks about issues that matter to people, like the cost of living. And if you can focus on that, then it's not terribly complicated. And in that sense, that is something that can be learned, I suppose.
Nikki?
I don't know. I think he clearly caught the imagination of lots of people. I was watching an interview somebody did last night, and they'd voted for Trump last year, and they voted for Madani yesterday.
Wow,
now, that is quite a shift.
That is quite a swing.
And I suspect that's partly because they just want to shake the system up. And so I think if there are a number of voters, and I think we do have to watch for that in the UK, who are sort of, in a way, I don't mind who I vote for. I just want to send a signal to the establishment, to Westminster, to Parliament, that I want to shake up, I want things to change. And so the fascinating thing, of course, will be, as we know, it's easy to make the promises on the campaign trail, actually, is he now going to be able to deliver, particularly given he's got a president who
will
is
do
very
his damn hardest not to
absolutely.
make it happen. But just very finally on that point, I mean, why is populism? We talk about these terms all the time, but we focus a lot on right-wing populism. Actually, isn't this a demonstration? Interesting, of course, the Green Party leader talking a little earlier. Maybe we don't talk about left-wing populism enough. And actually, it could be a real weakness for Labour going forward.
Well, definitely, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the time you talk about Labour, and with the Labour, a lot of the media focus on the threat from reform, but of course there's a huge threat from the left as well. We saw it at the last 2024 election when several Labour MPs lost seats to pro-Palestinian insurgent MPs. So certainly there is that left populism. But I think going to Nikki's point about shaking up the system, going against the status quo. I think there is this change, this desire for change, which Labour tapped into last year, and maybe there's that sort of theme that's still there where it resonates with people, whether it's left or right. You want to shake up the perceived system and get something different.
And just very finally on this, I mean, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, and I think also if there were clear campaign messages he used, and so people do like to vote for clarity, and so. But as I say, I think how he now governs is going to be
the real
incredibly
test.
Interesting.
Max and Nikki, it's been an absolute pleasure tonight. Thank you very much indeed. We certainly got around a lot of issues, didn't we, in different parts of the world. And that is it for the Politics Hub for tonight. We're back at 7 tomorrow. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sergey and me. Have a nice evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.